Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Greetings everyone. My name is Muhammad DZIKRI Tirta Buana from SMAN93 93 Jakarta. The motion that we're going to be discussing today is the House believes that governments should provide significant financial incentives for urban citizens to move to rural areas. As part of the opposition, I would first like to rebut some of the points made by the affirmation team before going into some of the arguments that I have concocted on my own, right? Okay. The affirmation team has made several arguments. One of them being infrastructure overburden and overpopulation. They make the argument that with an overburdened infrastructure and general overpopulation, it causes massive problems in the city. I would like to disagree on one point. Overpopulation itself is not the problem. Badly managing a population is. And thus the opposition team would like to provide some counterpoints of their own. Instead of running away to rural areas, we can instead use that money to improve and reform housing policy, modeling it after more efficient systems like the Dutch or the Japanese, which has more focus on apartment buildings instead of single-family housing, which tends to crowd up places while not necessarily housing that many people. Secondly is increasing the output of basic necessities. They talk about how infrastructure cannot keep up with the increasing demands of the city. Instead of running away from that, we can improve the electrical grids so that it doesn't suffer from rolling blackouts. Water shortages in the city, instead of running away from that, we can increase the water pumps in the city, the amount of water pumps in the city, to reduce price hikes within it. Instead of using the money to migrate the people away to rural areas, we can increase the capabilities of our urban areas. Thirdly, public transportation in the Indonesian urban areas have been focusing a lot more on the American model, which I would argue is not correct. We should instead focus more on European model, where they focus a lot more of their time, investment, and money on public transportation instead of private transportation. This will also lower net carbon gas emissions within urban areas. Second argument they brought up is how they should implement it. Essentially, how they would the mechanisms regarding this, right? With injections of cash into families willing to move out of urban areas and low interest loans to facilitate businesses to move into rural areas. The opposition team would like several words regarding this. The first argument we have is the inflation that it will cause. The more money there is in circulation, the higher inflation is, and the higher price becomes. Correct? Yes. And the problems that come with a rising inflation in such a rapid and drastic rate include price increases that I mentioned earlier, shrinking wages, because remember, those wages are not increasing, but the worth of money is devaluing as inflation rises. So wages in it of itself, why they don't necessarily look like they are lowering, they are in fact shrinking, as well as many other knock-on effects on the economy that I cannot even go on to discuss. Second problem with this is risk of loans not coming back. Giving loans to inexperienced borrowers is a risky venture, to say the least. Some of them are going to fail and going to be a burden on the taxpayer overall. The third is third argument they bring up is negligency towards rural areas. This is something I failed to create a proper counter argument with several times, but I feel necessary to provide a point here. There is a reason why we centralized in the first place, and it was because it increased overall national capabilities and productive capacities during Indonesia's first early steps into nationhood. It allowed urban areas to carry most of Indonesia's other regions in terms of productive capabilities. Admittedly, we did prioritize Java over others, Java and Sumatra over others, but that's not to say that the entire country overall would benefit. The fourth argument that the affirmation team brought up was the private sector part. And this is where we strongly oppose it. Because that will also mean, if private sectors were to increase to these rural areas, that would also mean a forced expansion of administrations within those rural districts. As that means government regulators and government administrators has to go to those rural areas, rural and sometimes undeveloped areas, to properly manage and administrate those expansions. And that can be a heavy, that can provide a heavy tax on the overall population of the nation, effectively decreasing the value of the handouts that you just gave. With that being said, I would like to present some of my own arguments for the opposition team, instead of just rebuting every single thing that the affirmation team throws at us. The first, giving handouts encourages bad culture. Secondly, work fields not only in the rural areas but also in the cities will shrink as the industrialization inevitably begins. Thirdly, they are not guaranteed to stay there as they are only incentivized to go there. Fourth, risk of potential social impacts that would come, such as racism. The fifth one being environmental concerns that will arise naturally as settlers come to those regions. Okay, let's go one by one. Giving handouts encourages bad culture. What do I mean by this? Well, it will set the expectation that they will only move due to the money, and therefore will increase societal tendency towards materialism, which will have knock-on effects on society. Second part is work fields will shrink. Okay, let me explain this one. The work field in not only the rural areas but the cities will dry up. Potential deindustrialization begins because as those people leave the cities into rural areas, they will take jobs from rural areas and diminish jobs in the cities. Thirdly, is they are not guaranteed to stay there. This is because they are incentivized by the money, and therefore they are incentivized to take the money by going there. They are not incentivized to actively develop. They have no incentive to actually stay and develop the region they went to. They can just go back after the government stops looking. The fourth is risk of potential social impacts. Various races intermingling will cause conflicts no matter how hard you chant Bhinneka Tunggal Ika. Some may even be viewed as colonizers if they come in unwanted, creating various security problems throughout the nation. The fifth one is the environmental impacts. As settlers come, they will inevitably create many environmental concerns, which will be a bad impact on society overall. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.